Oh, looks like we're ready to go here. On a beautiful, beautiful day. No lawns getting mowed, just the birds in the yard. Probably hear them, but uh, that's okay too. I have a quiz here for you. Uh, a day later than I would have liked, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Um, and this one's over a book I think everybody seems to be enjoying, although it's late in the semester and reading is getting uh, more and more involved in a little bit to get things done as we move along. The next two novels, with this one as well, move pretty quickly um, and in different and familiar directions. Familiar because, of course, dystopian fiction uh, does things in similar patterns, and a lot of the times the science fiction is an idea literature, which is one of the reasons people like it a lot. In general, the ideas take precedent over characterization, although the novels, as you've read, have gotten better and better at creating what we call fully rounded characters, and Todd is one of them, especially in one of these bildungsroman, where you have a journey and we chronicle a boy's progression from, let's say, innocence, and in this case, ignorance as well, into a higher level of experience and insight. And one of the ways we see this is even in the manner in which the dog becomes important. In the beginning, Todd doesn't really care for Manchi. Um, and he tells us to stay on the Mayor Prentice's good side. Cillian bought Todd the dog when of course, Todd would have rather have had a fission bike, or what he really likes to look at, um, a hunting knife that Ben has, because this kind of a idea of having the knife and that power in your hand, this whole idea of the title of the knife of never letting go, um, is because of who he is and what he knows, uh, what Todd equates with mankind. It's quite phallic, there's no question about it, but that knife is very important leading up to the very conclusion of the novel, this first one. I mean, in the end, they go into town, they arrive at Haven, and they're meted by um, the mayor of New Prentice Town, who is, and I can't remember his first name right now. He tells, no, that's in the second book. I just read all three of them. Eventually, he will tell uh, Viola what his first name is because he wants to create a bond with her. Um, and in the beginning of the novel, Todd, he believes what he's told. And to protect him, Ben and Cillian don't try to tell him anything different, believe that the spackle released a germ during the war, uh, that the spackle released a germ during the war that killed all the women and half the men. And over the course, finally, Ben, when he's with Dr. Snow, right, the last place they actually go to and stay before they find their surprise, or at least Todd does, because Viola's been wounded. Their final arrival, which is a disappointment to New Haven, which is now New Prentice Town, and the mayor is now the president. Um, and that's what he believes until he learns differently. Um, and then Ben tells Todd, these spackle buildings, they're not sure what they are, but they get the word because of writing there. And Ben tells Todd that in their original language, spackle, the English variation thereof, means the people, which is not uncommon. Sometimes it means humans, sometimes it means all these. The people is pretty common, but they're the people, and as you won't find out in this book, but very, very closely aligned with the land. And of course, they didn't have guns at the time, so that they were basically slaughtered. Uh, as Todd says, that they buried themselves in the water, and there were so many spackle killed that really made the swamp for quite a while stink. Um, and that war's not been that long ago, um, because they're this group from Old World, which may or may not be Earth as we know it. Um, but this group came for religious freedom and created New Eden, which Aaron's always talking about. And Todd, not with his sense of humor, he doesn't really know he has. Says, "Yeah, a lot of that really turned out well, didn't it?" Um, and then we find too, as I told you, there's this kind of a very strong emphasis on gender bending and gender roles on here. And what starts out when Viola's silence is the first thing that really attracts Todd to her. And he knew it was a girl, for whatever reason. But it's not, that she had a great face or butt or anything like that. And he didn't need her when she was fighting with Aaron, that he could run in and gallantly save her. Um, they save each other a number of different times, but it's that silence that he feels. It's a hole in the noise, as he puts it at one point. And I rather like that, the silence of a woman, because, of course, the women can read the minds of men, but men cannot really review women, and so a lot of the places that's a threat to men. Um, and Far Branch, I like it, is that the woman, is it Hildy? She says, the, Todd asks the man, he says, your noise seems muted somehow. And he says, well, that's to keep it so that those women can't think of what I'm thinking. And she says that, that makes us even better because we have to figure out ways around what they're trying to do. And then on the journey, and this, I think, is important on the journey. That would be Todd. And now Viola on their journey out of the swamp after he takes up with her. And, uh, Aaron's been attacked by a crocodile, but he's just one tough cookie, as it turns out, as fanatics often are. When they begin their journey out of the swamp, Todd sees something he thought he saw before, but says that they're not around anymore. They're kind of like dodo birds. The sailors ate them all up and they became extinct. But Todd sees a casser, which is a large, friendly, flightless bird, and Todd gives it some cheese. It spits right back up all over him, but it's not anything to be afraid of. But here is a setting it up later, because at this point everybody believes, or so Todd's told, that the spackle are extinct all over the planet, which is not the case. Todd will meet one, but believe me, they're around, and they've been practicing on how to beat the humans because they come back in a later series. Um, and then as Todd's a pretty intuitive kid. He's a lot like, as I did mentioned in a different video. He's not unlike Titus in some ways. In that he has his perspective. His perspective is based on his experience and these kinds of things. And in many ways, most of what he believes is wrong. That's a hard thing to take for someone who's almost 13 years old. Um, but he also worries when he starts putting things together. If the spackle put out a disease, then of course he worries because Les Viola will get this spackle disease, which he believes will kill her and which he believes he can give her. And he hopes against hope that he's wrong. And this sets things up. To suggest to you that he's open to maybe he's wrong, which is the road to, if you will, is the revelations that he has to deal with throughout the novel. Um, and it's not, and part of the progression that goes on as he becomes more aware of Viola as an entity, as a person. Um, he may be, he's kind of alarmed at the hole in the noise after a while, but at one point, if you read when he's following her, and of course she can hear this stuff, uh, he can't read her at first. The whole idea of the silence that she has about her brings him to tears. So we find that he's also quite a sensitive person. So he's not running around thinking he has to fight his desire to leave her. It's an idea of wanting to communicate as it develops. Um, and again, he saved her from Aaron, and then she blows up the bridge with after she had given him fire and food, which is kind of like what a man's supposed to do, but that's part of the gender bending we have here. Todd's going crazy because he can't cut the rope. He's also a little boy given to tantrums, it would seem. He's banging his head about what an idiot he is, and he's screaming at her, if it weren't for you, I'd have been to buy this bridge a long time ago. You're nothing, you're nothing. He repeats to her things that he had heard said to himself, and along those lines, it's all part of his experience. But, she comes from the next group of pioneers, if you will, and she was on the scout ship, Mother and Father Lost, and Todd's mother and father lost. But after they blow up the bridge with the cooking, uh, cool cooking thing, um, that bridge that leads to Prentice, it was a road at one point. She takes a bandage out and puts it on him, and the bandage is partially alive. It's basically synthetic human tissue that dies after the wound's healed, and he feels almost an immediate coolness. So she rescues him, or tries to take care of him. She treats his wound. And when the settlers to the New World landed on the planet, and according to Todd talking, and he's probably pretty much right, about only 20 years ago, um, and if they haven't been there that long and they've all become subsistence farmers and they live in separate places, the big plans kind of got shattered, as we talked about the New Eden. Um, and the people use the spaceships for new houses, but that it didn't work out, and we find all the different communities have different kind of arrangements, but only 20 years or so, and the wars against the Spackle, I think 13 or 14 years previous to that, so they got in fights with the indigenous people right away, and feel like they killed them off. At least that's the story in uh, Prenticetown. Now, the other thing is that Boyle is interesting because she's not a child of the New World exactly, and she arrives on Old World, of course, on that scout ship, the crash that killed her parents. But she was born in space, which is interesting. She was born on the way. We figure she's pretty much the age of Todd, so they're kind of equally matched in some ways. He never knew his mother or father, and she's lost hers, as we mentioned before. And one of the things we learn right away when he gets to Far Branch, the first city that they're supposed to warn, but Todd, of course, doesn't want to let Viola read the mother's book. And Ben's message, of course, is warn them in Far Branch. But, even if they did and they tried, there's an army coming, and the woman is not stupid, but she says, look, there's only 5 guys after him. And of course, in the end, it's the army. It's just virtually every man except Ben and the dead Cillian are on horses and are following the mayor, who, of course, controls them. I am the circle, and the circle is me. And they attack Far Branch, wildly unprepared, and they will all either, like Ivan, join the new army, as we find out in the second book, or, in fact, they're slaughtered, including children. But before the village became Prenticetown, we learned that its name was New Elizabeth. New Elizabeth. And the rancor of the people who escaped before the slaughter. After the slaughter, the law is if anybody leaves Prenticetown, they die. They're executed. But you have people in the town. Someone says, well, there are still people who support anti-women, everything. But in Farwell, Matthew Lyle attempts to kill Todd because he hates all people from Prenticetown, where he fled, and presumably after his wife was murdered. And so he, of course, wants to kill Todd. He gets so far that he cuts off the tail of poor Manchi, um, whom Todd's getting to like more. And of course, Manchi likes uh, Viola. But it's also here one of the shocks that Todd has. It wouldn't be a shock to Viola, but Todd, they arrive in Far Branch, and after, like I said, destroying that bridge, Todd realizes that not only does this village have women and children, but also women such as Hildy and Francia appear to be in charge of the community or to hold high places. So here you have a different kind of community. As and she tells him there's all different kinds as you go along. They will decide to try to stay away from as many as they can because, of course, the army is coming for Todd, and so they don't want people to be destroyed. But it's beyond their control because it turns out this has been a plan for a long time. Now, at one point, Todd and Violet encounter a guy named Wilf, who seems to be, let's just say, not all that bright. And that's in the cart that's going to transfer them through that huge herd of cow-like creatures. And now, at that point, Viola tells Wilf their names, and they take Hildy, which was the name of the woman whom they first met that Ben thought was a man because he'd never seen, an older woman, and Ben. Now, at this point, Viola is also catching on because what she's doing is not using their real names because people can read people like Wilf. Um, and so she's showing her intelligence. I think that Todd at this point is impressed with her abilities. Um, and, and then they'll meet Wilf later. Actually, in this book, um, Todd meets them and Wilf and says it's not my real name, and basically Wilf says, yeah, I know. Wilf carries over as an important character in the next two books as well. So Hildy and Ben fake names to protect them. And the other thing is that Todd finds out is that Viola has a really good talent for masking her New World accent, and so she can help not to stick out. The last thing she needs at this point is to stick out. But, she also starts using ain't, which amuses Todd. And she even says effing after a while. She begins to fit in with Todd's world. So he doesn't think that she's, after he gets to know her a bit, that she's maligning his intelligence by using this language. He's hard enough on himself for what he does anyway. And as I said, he's hard because he's armed with that knife of never letting go, the hunting knife that Ben gave him on his exit from Prentisstown. He cannot bring himself to kill up to a point. Todd, because of this, berates himself for being a coward. He thinks he's a coward, but this is his power, as Viola comes to understand. Because she says, look at the mayor wants Todd, and even sends his son Davy to capture him because the mayor wants to make Todd a killer. And if he can turn Todd into a killer, then he's totally victorious because it is against the boy's constitution, and he's the last boy. So it's sort of like the last little piece into the puzzle of conquest the mayor's looking for. So Todd has a very powerful role. He doesn't know all that the, let's say if you want to call it a celebration or whatever, entails as far as becoming a man. I mean, there's more to it, as he finds out and realizes, is that the way you become a man is by killing someone. So all those people that Todd thought were missing, it turns out, of course, that other of the boys turned into men in Prentisstown have murdered these people, killed them, and that makes them culpable. as Ben will say, nobody's innocent, because Ben didn't lift a finger, although that his partner did, but they wanted to be able to save Todd, to bring him up, so they were willing to not take part in the revolution. So, as he says, everybody's guilty, and as he told him, you have to forgive yourself sometimes. It's an important message that Todd has to learn. Now, when Todd kills the Spackle, of course, as Ben will tell him, look, you didn't know any better. I mean, Todd's been brought up to believe they're cold-blooded killers, they're alien, inhuman, and all this stuff. And although the Spackle is afraid, and in fact Viola realizes the depth of the fear, Todd can't stop himself, and he brutally murders it, and has blood all over the place. And then, of course, as he's wont to do, Aaron shows up again, having been beaten up with a crocodile, and he has his head mashed because Todd wouldn't knife him. He surprises both of them, and he stabs Todd in the back with his own knife, which is cushioned a bit by the book. But as it turns out, Aaron was not trying to kill Todd. He's trying to wound him. In fact, the wound in his back where Aaron struck him, everything becomes a weapon, becomes infected, and Todd becomes sick, and he worries at that point whether he's going to suffer because of the Spackle blood that was on the blade that is now mixing with his blood. But in fact, of course, Aaron didn't kill him on purpose. Because as it becomes clear by the end of the book, when they have the final battle in the cave, that Aaron all along, and this is one of the things that Ben realized when the boy came home, and he had been beaten, and so that son of a whore, I'd have to talk to him, and that that the boy had heard the silence is the kind of it's time to get rid of the boy, because in fact Aaron wants, and he's overboard, this guy. Aaron wants Todd to kill him, but he wants to be the martyr that Todd, the person whom Todd kills, so that Todd can become a man, and that Aaron can fulfill his destiny, and through his death and Todd's becoming a member of the army of Prentiss will be, kind of God-driven. So he doesn't. He does go through the book, but he doesn't want to kill him. He wants to piss him off, and that's why he takes Viola. And so when Todd rescues Viola from Aaron, Aaron's raging, not because he had planned to sacrifice Viola. He kept her drugged. He wants Todd to find him and to kill him, and that is his own sacrifice. He's mad, of course, and then and Manchie's helped by burning stuff that wasn't there. He had a piece of wood and went and bit Aaron's nose off while Aaron's trying to keep Todd from getting away in the boat with the drugged Viola, and to escape, Todd has to sacrifice his now beloved dog Manchie, whose neck Aaron cracks. And so you can see part of the growth of Todd by the manner in which he's become aligned with or connected with his dog. Nothing like a boy and his dog, as they used to like to say. Now, Todd's eventually saved. Dr. Snow saves Todd's life. We're getting towards the end of the book at this point, and they live in another community. And Viola won't say anything a while, but she's very frustrated. But one of the things is that they don't listen to women. This is another of these misogynistic places where the men and the women lead very segregated lives. The men and the women lead this life, and the women's, and so there's often a dormitory of their own, so they can't interfere in men's business. And so while they're polite to Viola, they show no interest in her, even though Ben tells the son, the doctor's son, well, I'm bringing Viola with me, and he's kind of upset about that because they're going to have to go to hear the elder men. It's all run by men. Along the way, there, Todd has a surprise, and Todd realizes that Ben remains alive, and I like the way this is done. Ben is in the bushes. He's been waiting because he can hear Todd's noise. There's the song, the sound of a familiar song enters Todd's head and fills his noise, and at that point he says, Ben. And this is a song I do believe that Viola sings, that's from the mother's diary and in a voice that reminds him of the mother he never knew. And at this point, Ben tells Todd some things he has to know that he had to keep from him to ensure that he survived, basically. He learns from Ben that the spackle did not use germ warfare at all, that it comes from, it's natural, and that Mayor Prentice had, in fact, had all the women killed and the men who would not go along with him. And the mayor of the town knew Elizabeth was, in fact, a woman named Jessica Elizabeth, who organized the girls and the younger boys and attempted to flee with them across the swamp to save them from the slaughter. The younger boys aren't necessarily killed off, but certainly all the girls are, including Jessica Elizabeth. So that, now you know why that Matthew Lyle was so angry with anything to do with Prentice Town, and that's because of what happened, and that's why the laws are set up so that Ben looks like he's going to be executed, saved, by the way, because basically the army, Prentice's army, everybody says in the thousands, although it's probably not demographically popular, this large army that he has arrives, and they'll destroy this community too, and some of the men, though, will join in the army. And so Todd remembers here and there things that Ben said. There are lots of things that float in his head, and those quotations are good for this that I suggested to you on the link. Ben said that war makes monsters of men, and this, of course, is the final book in the trilogy when Todd and them get engaged in a war and its horrors. So war makes monsters of men. And Davy shoots Viola, and Todd, of course, doesn't kill Davy, but he runs into town with Viola, who's been shot in the stomach, hoping that he can find someone to cure. And of course, he runs into the president of the new country at the time. But there is a sense too, that in the beginning, he was although he sometimes the beauty of her silence, Viola's silence, brought him to tears. Todd does come to a point when he says, I know who she is. I know who Viola Iata is. And then this knowing of her, despite the silence, is another marker of his progress, because he had told, I think it was Snow, where they had something that says about something about your girlfriend or your girl, and he says, she belongs to nobody. She's her own person. This is another of those, and Viola has a kind of an amazed look, but there's another marker of his progress in terms of the gender relations that are messed up throughout the planet, pretty much. Although you may think that Hildy's place is a little better, and there's still these hatreds rippling under the current there. But still, he, if you want to just say, gives her space, but he doesn't see her as subservient. They are equals, like they say. I save you, you save me. That's our job. Um, but the final confrontation before poor Viola gets shot in the stomach by Davy. Um, in the final confrontation with Aaron in the cave, this is where Aaron, to figure it out, the whole idea that he wants. He never was going to want to. He would have killed Viola, but he wasn't going to. He was waiting for Davy, for Todd to come, so that Todd would kill him. It's Viola mortally wounds Aaron by taking Aaron's blade and sticking it through the neck of Aaron. So she mortally wounds him so that Todd doesn't have to. Todd, who's never killed another human being, although he sees himself as a killer, of course, for killing the Spackle, which is, I think, they all think that Spackle is an alien race when they're the aliens. Spackles are another creature. But as Ben tells him, you didn't know, and what you have to do is realize your mistake and go on, because none of us is without fault. But Viola is the one who in fact kills Aaron, and he falls down over the rocks and plummets to his death. And so then you have brought to fruition the first book, excellent in its as a standalone. Of course, the ending is way up in the air, but not so much more than Feed or some of the others. What's going to happen next, even at the end of the trilogy of Hunger Games. What nothing is certain. But in this particular case, it leads to another two books, which I think you would like, um, with Todd and Viola, and Spackle Army, and Viola's another scout ship comes, and we're going to have a big war. And it does make monsters of men, to be sure. Okay, do a good job on the quiz. I'm enjoying looking over your essays, have them all finished in a couple days here. The essay part of your exam, and then I have some essays I'll be reading and getting back to. So keep up the good work, get to the discussion threads, and do a good job.